Hi, welcome to our starter video on Azure SQL Managed Instance. In this video, we'll break down the key fields you see when working with this resource to give you a clear idea of how to configure it. Let's get started. Name defines the unique name for your SQL Managed Instance. It should be a unique string within your resource group. Location specifies the Azure region where this resource will be deployed. Tags help organize and categorize your resources. They use key value pairs to label the SQL managed instance. SKU section defines the instance's performance and pricing tier. Capacity specifies the number of vCores allocated. Family defines the hardware generation used for the instance. Name specifies the SKU name for the managed instance. Size indicates the compute size configuration, typically a letter plus number code, such as P3. Tier defines the service tier. Identity section manages the identity settings for your SQL managed instance. Type defines the type of managed identity for this resource, such as system assigned, user assigned, or none. User assigned identities configures user assigned managed identities if the type of the managed identity is chosen as user assigned. Administrator login specifies the username for the SQL managed instance administrator. Administrator login password sets the password for the administrator account. Authentication metadata provides authentication-related metadata. Collation defines the default collation setting for the managed instance. Database format specifies the format version of the managed database. DNS zone partner specifies the DNS zone partner for linking managed instances across subscriptions. Hybrid secondary usage indicates whether the instance is used as a hybrid secondary replica. Instance pool ID specifies the ID of the instance pool if the instance is part of a pool. Is general purpose v2 indicates whether the instance uses the general purpose v2 service tier. Key ID specifies the key used for encryption if customer-managed keys are enabled. License type defines whether the instance uses Azure Hybrid Benefit or a pay-as-you-go license. Maintenance Configuration ID specifies the maintenance configuration for scheduled updates. Managed Instance Create Mode defines the creation mode, such as New Instance or Point-in-Time Restore. Minimal TLS version sets the minimum supported TLS version for secure connections. Pricing model defines the pricing model used for the instance. Primary User Assigned Identity ID specifies the primary user assigned identity for the instance. Proxy override configures how traffic is routed to the managed instance. Public Data Endpoint Enabled determines whether the public endpoint for data access is enabled. Requested Backup Storage Redundancy specifies the level of backup redundancy, such as geo-redundant, locally redundant, or zone redundant. Restore point in time allows restoring the instance to a specified point in time. Source Managed Instance ID specifies the source instance ID for creating a replica or restoring from backup. Storage IOPS defines the number of input-output operations per second allocated to storage. Storage size in GB specifies the allocated storage size in gigabytes. Storage throughput MBPs defines the storage throughput in megabytes per second. Subnet ID specifies the subnet where the managed instance is deployed. Time zone ID sets the time zone for the managed instance. vCores specifies the number of virtual cores allocated to the instance. Zone redundant determines whether the instance is deployed across availability zones for higher resilience. Administrators defines additional administrator settings. Administrator type specifies the type of administrator, such as Active Directory. Azure AD Only Authentication indicates whether only Azure AD authentication is allowed. Login defines the login name for the administrator. Principal type specifies the type of principal, user, group, or service principal. SID represents the security identifier for the administrator. Tenant ID identifies the Azure Active Directory tenant associated with the administrator. Service principal defines the service principal of the managed instance. With that, we are done with the fundamental properties of this resource. If you don't want to configure your resource from scratch, you can choose one of the Clofi draft resources, where the fields are populated for you in advance, and the chosen options are explained in detail for your reference. In addition, you have the opportunity to discover the usage of this resource within different cloud architectures. Clofi also generates the infrastructure as code automatically in Terraform, Bicep, and ARM formats to save you time from tedious work.